Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to sit down and talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. Happy birthday, Cameron. How you doing?
Hey, thank you. Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? It's your birthday. It is also our anniversary as we are recording this. It'll be, anniversary plus 1 day after or when people are hearing this, when it goes live to everybody. But yeah, we made it through a year of That Nerdy Site. Hooray! So we will talk a little bit about that as kind of one of our topics of the show today. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping, as I touched on there. We're in year two, which ideally would have been like a big blowout stream or something, and maybe Cam and I would have flown out to Austin and hung out with the crew out there or something. That obviously couldn't happen, let alone because job stuff has kind of thrown things for a loop, but also of course the COVID times. So instead, I posted a big old kind of a write up about some of my particular goals for year two of that nerdy site, including a video versions of the podcast, which hopefully, if all goes according to plan, as I'm recording this right now, OBS seems to not be freaking out, and there should be a video version of this show going up on YouTube instead of kind of what we did in year one of static shots. So that's one example, but we also have a couple new shows that launched on November 1st there. That Conversational Podcast, which is a show that's kind of going to be our take on the like one-on-one interview shows. So it's going to be largely a nerd from That Nerdy Site sitting down with a guest to talk about a specific topic of interest to hopefully both parties. The first episode of that is Cameron out there speaking with Ian Preschel, from A Plus Anime, talking about One Piece. That went live this morning. And then we also are going to be trying to do more with the YouTube and Twitch stuff. And so on the YouTube side of things, I've launched a new Let's Play series called That Retro Gaming Show, where right now at least I'm going through and just kind of spending a little bit of time with each of the games in the NES Classic. And then it'll kind of probably progress into the Super Nintendo Classic, and I've also got the Genesis Classic and PlayStation Classic here. And then we'll, once we've burned through all of those, we'll dive into whatever other retro games kind of seem fitting for kind of a look back on the history of games. And so that's largely like me just sitting down, playing the game, talking about memories, if I have specific memories on said game, or in a couple of cases that I've recorded so far that have not yet gone live, it's like my first time playing the game. So I'm just kind of sitting there and experiencing something like Ice Climber for the first time. So should be fun, just a fun little Let's Play series to be a little bit more active and try and really test out all of the expensive new streaming equipment I've been buying, because I do want to get back into to streaming and stuff like that. So yeah, those are a couple of the big things that are new on the site here for year two. So check all that out, and you can check out everything over there at thatnerdysite.com. As for this show, of course, as always, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, rate, subscribe, review, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful monthly Patreons, monthly Patreon producers. Easy for me to say. We have Pam and Bev Larson, Sherry Starkey, Teresa Wilkinson, and myself, Trevor Starkey. So yeah, with that all out of the way, let's dive into to kind of some of the stuff we've been either doing or playing or whatever. Cam, you mentioned that you wanted to kind of just check in on kind of the year two stuff. So let's dive into a little bit about that. What did you want to kind of talk about? Because, like, admittedly, a lot of this year two planning has just kind of been like, we've been chatting about things occasionally through Slack, or we had a call a couple months, or like a month back maybe, where we kind of like pitched some ideas, and we've kind of been doing that a little bit over the last few months. But I would say this was much more disjointed than maybe the year one launch, where I think we were a lot more all kind of like in communication with one another, and I think a lot of that's just a result of the times we live in. But would you want to check in on?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, bon voyage to and silent heart to our departed co-hosts, Chloe, Ben, and Christian. We hardly knew ye. Uh, Absolutely wonderful people. Circumstances, of course, being completely different for each of them about why they left, and it happened at like a terrible time for us, but it did happen, and it's nice to see that they are all doing well. Christian is recovering pretty well. I've talked to him a couple of times. He seems to be in high spirits. Ben is, of course, doing what he needs to do to, you know, I think he has started his master's program at this point. But absolutely wonderful young man. Miss him dearly. And of course, Chloe is blowing up like we knew that she would. So, just a little bit of an update on those fellas and how they've been doing.
The break in there sounded like just an update on those fucks, but I know that clearly wasn't what you were saying. Yeah, yeah, no, much. I said as much in the
If
letter.
I was just referring to Ben, then yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I said as much in the letter, but yes, of course, thank you to Ben and Chloe and Christian, who, though they have parted ways with us in this past year, made a ton of great stuff with us, and I will be forever grateful for them sharing their talents with us over here at That Nerdy Site, and yeah, I wish nothing but the best for all of them, and yeah, seeing Chloe just like shoot through the stratosphere and be doing stuff over with like Rooster Teeth and all that stuff in recent months has been great to see.
Yeah, like we knew it was going to happen.
Oh yeah, no,
we made jokes about it a lot.
From when I like approached them about it at PAX West last year. I was basically like, I know I'm really only getting you on like borrowed time until somebody else snatches you up, Chloe. So, but we will take whatever we can get.
She was literally on the Kind of Funny extra live stream promoting us. So
yeah, she was not in Austin with us last year because she was like going to be going to Kind of Funny the week later. So, yeah, it happens.
No, and Chris, like I mentioned, Christian's doing very well. It's nice to see him be more active online again. There was a period of time where like he just was not there, and it's good to see that he's doing well. Love that man so much, and of course Ben. I meant what I said when Trevor asked if I said anybody was a fuck.
No, Ben's great.
No, I'm joking.
Ben
Ben is amazing. I love Ben so much. He's he is such a like he is not as active right now online, but when he does tweet something or post something, it's always just like chef's kiss, top quality. Like such a great young man.
he checked in, or he I tweeted a few weeks back. I've talked about this on a couple episodes now, but I started watching Schitt's Creek after everybody was like raving about it, and I got halfway through the first season. I was like, I'm not feeling this. This isn't for me. And Ben was like, he encouraged me to stick with it and stick it out. And I checked in with him, a couple seasons later, and I was like, all right, I think I finally turned the corner on this. I'm enjoying it now. And then I tweeted a couple days ago after I finished the finale of like, this is the show I think I've turned around the most on of any show I can remember. Like I really appreciated how that show wrapped up, and I thought it was beautiful. I thought it had a ton of great character moments. I still personally probably could have skipped the first couple seasons and wouldn't have missed out on too much, I feel. But I really liked especially like the second half of that show. I thought it was firing on all cylinders kind of all the way through. Apart from, I still hate the character of Roland. I just I've never been a fan of Chris Elliott. He plays a very specific type of character that I just hate everything he does. And so yeah, that was like anytime he would pop up on the show, I was just like, come on, let's just move to the next like scene I want with characters that I want to spend time with. But overall, I really enjoyed Schitt's Creek and kind of so yeah, I reached out to Ben basically to thank him for convincing me to stick with it because yeah, it was a really good strong way to wrap that up. and yeah, his taste was right on the money there. I should have known that it had to have had some kind of like Paddington elements to it, in that like, oh, it just becomes like super nice and wholesome, and sure enough, that's, I multiple times in the last couple seasons of that show, I would find myself just like melting and crying of just like nice happiness moments and stuff. So it was a great kind of that thus ends my time with Schitt's Creek. I sat down and watched immediately after like the wrap up documentary thing that they did kind of, and again, it was just one of those things where I was just like, yep, I'm bawling. I'm a bawling mess for some of this stuff because of the impact that show had on so many other people as it was going. Anything else there on year two that you wanted to kind of like chime in on, or
I
year
need
one,
to
talking
talk
about
about
year
it.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, year one. I got to talk about it. It has been an absolute pleasure to see how that podcast has grown. That Ultimate Video Game List show. I am so excited for the next season. Like seasons 1, 2, and we didn't do 3, did we?
No,
Did we do 3?
there's not been a
Yeah,
three
that's
yet.
right.
It was like
That's right.
I mentioned in the letter, like season two happened basically like the first half of that season happened pre-lockdown, and then the second half happened like after we were locked down, and like it was an especially interesting like time to be doing that kind of podcast. And then for the rest of 2020, I've basically sat there and said, like I don't know if I can like bring myself to do a 10-week commitment to this, so I don't want to reach out to other people to try and do a 10-week commitment. But we have had like people reach out and want to be a part of it. So I basically said in the year two letter, I definitely want to bring it back for season three, of course, and with all of the year end stuff that we're going to be doing, with all the game of the year conversations and everything we'll be having in these next couple months, as well as any potential guests I would have on are going to be having in these next couple months. We probably won't see it until 2021, but it will be back, yes. And now that I'm learning
Yeah.
OBS, hopefully I can I can bring it back with a more pizzazz to the video versions of the show. So yeah,
Cool
that's
graphics.
who yeah, or at least just any kind of graphics or any kind of anything. Um, that's it's a learning experience for me. Like turning into, I'm attempting to kind of turn into more of a producer kind of role. Like I feel like that's largely been my role in year one anyway, as kind of the person taking all the episodes and all the audio and editing everything together and just getting all the content out. But I want to try and really double down on the video side of things this year round, be it in the podcasts or doing just more stuff on YouTube or Twitch. Really, not just being some voice. Although again, like I in the year two letter, I kind of ran through some of the stats and stuff. And in year one, we had 11,000 ish downloads across all of our podcasts, which is in my estimation, great numbers. I don't really have a ton of stuff to compare it to, but certainly blew anything else that I'd done out of the water. And then our YouTube had over 24,000 views. Admittedly, like a ton of those come from just the SEO of like our That Wannabe Film Class shows being like the name of the movie, and then That Wannabe Film Class episode blah blah blah, or Disney Plus being the name of the thing, and then that D Plus show. And the thing that I kind of keep pointing to that is fitting for you is our Darby O'Gill episode of that D Plus show saw a
Yeah.
huge spike in numbers on March 17th. Like I was looking at the analytics and I just saw like a big old line right through the roof on that day. I was like, what the heck? Like what happened on St. Patrick's Day? And I look at the breakdown of like what those views were. I was like, oh, bunch of people were just like trying to bootleg or watch a free version of Darby O'Gill, I guess, and had sought that out, and then yeah, based on like
That or they heard the heinous mockery and downplayment of that incredible Disney classic by the other co-hosts other than me.
I don't think that's what happened, because the average like watch time on that was like 22 seconds. So they pretty much clicked on, saw that it wasn't the movie, and clicked off. I don't think they could have gotten my impressions on it in such a short period of time. But yeah, it was just one of those like, oh yeah, like just numbers, clicks through the roof on that day. And then like I want to say our highest performing video is like the Mad Max Fury Road episode of that wannabe film class, which has like 6,000 views or something like that. And again, I'm guessing it's just like, oh, were clicking on that, not realizing it was like a podcast talking about the movie. But yeah, just some fun like numbers things there, that I got a chuckle out of, certainly, from our first year. And yeah, I just kind of want to invest more into it. One of the things that I think one of our best pieces of content on the YouTube channel this last year was our PAX coverage, which admittedly took like a while to get out the door, because that again hit like right as everything started getting locked down. So, but eventually we got a whole bunch of kind of preview coverage that we had sat down and recorded at PAX, as well as Frank sat down and kind of edited a lot of B-roll into or over our conversations and stuff about the games. So I think kind of letting Frank do more of that kind of video editing stuff that he wants to do, and really kind of trying to push him to do that, I think will also help invest a little bit more in the YouTube side of things. And in the meantime, I can bust out my NES Classic, sit down for a little bit and record a series of Let's Plays, and just kind of start popping those up on the channel as well. Anything else?
It's been an exciting year. Talking about year two though, going forward, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the podcast that I literally like pushed to launch.
Yep.
Um, Sat down to the editing for it and everything. So, when it comes down to it, that conversational podcast was something that I've kind of really wanted to do back when I was not solo, back when I was doing part of KGN, Naughty Gamers. There was a podcast that I piloted and did 2 episodes of, called Cameron Crows. Thank you, of course, always for the name of that, Trevor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to like bring it back for that nerdy site, but it became a question of, well, one thing, who owns like Cameron Crows, and the idea the possible implications of that, which really weren't that big of a deal, but it did, like, that is a question of like, whenever you name a show after yourself, make sure that it belongs to you and not like not a company that you formed and then left.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that'd be pretty easy if you just like bought it from yourself for $1 or something like that. If you kind of still control, or you buy it from whoever's currently running KGN stuff, or whoever was, you could certainly always like look at doing that. And like I kind of made a similar offer effectively when Ben and Chloe left, in particular with that wannabe film class. I was like, if you guys want to take that and do something with it, I can, we can work something out on that front. But they were kind of ready to walk away from it. So yeah, it's still sitting out there. And I mentioned in year 2, we might, like, we have some movie ideas for podcasts, so we might end up repurposing that wannabe film class feed, but no concrete plans on that front yet. But I can appreciate like the going concern that you mentioned there.
Yeah, no, there was that, and then it also became a question of, well, how often is this show going to be produced? How often is it going to go out? Like, the first episodes of Cameron Crows are, I think, absolute bangers. One is a conversation with my younger brother, and then the other episode is Okayla from Uppercut. She said, "Hey, I want to do a podcast where I just basically break down somebody's like sign chart, like astrology sign chart." And I was like, "I'm game." And so it's like a 2.5-hour conversation about astrology. And like going through my stuff. And it's funny because it came out, and we did it before I came out publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And Kayla did not know that I was queer, and so that was like looking back on it now. That's a very fun podcast to listen to because it's like, yeah, okay, yep, mm-hmm. Anyway, that being said, so I'm like, I really wanted to kind of like bring that kind of fun, quasi chaotic energy to a podcast with that nerdy site. Frank had been for a long time saying he wanted to do like that nostalgia show. Um, uh, who was it that wanted to do a drinking? What am I saying? It's Jazz. Jazz wanted to do like a drinking podcast or like a focus on like an alcohol podcast. And like while these are all like not like problem like these are all really good ideas for a podcast, like the question is like content, like how quickly can you put those out? What's the schedule going to look for that? Because it goes from being a good concept idea to can this be a functional long-term running podcast or like how do we approach this? So that conversational podcast kind of came up and I mentioned it in the intro. It's kind of a culmination of a lot of different ideas for a podcast just kind of put into one because when you boil everything down, each of these shows was going to only be talking about a single subject per episode.
Yeah.
And so really when we were I think what was it like a month and a half ago, 2 months, when we had the meeting and we sat down and we're like, let's actually talk about like these new show ideas, and it all kind of boiled down and we all realized, oh, it's all only one conversation, like or a single topic of conversation. So, and I was like, well, let me go ahead and record something with Ian about One Piece because I want to talk to him about that, and we'll figure out what to call it later. And I had an absolute blast. Like at that time when we recorded, OK Beast was like still planning on continuing.
Mm-hmm.
So in the meanwhile between time, uh, OK Beast has sunset, which is a sad thing. I tweeted out about them saying uh, they were absolute you know trailblazers when it came to amateur podcasting,
Yeah. No.
and what they did to basically say like you depend like regardless of the size of your team, you can bring big ideas to the table, um, and like make them work. And it goes to show because two of their biggest members are now in the professional games media.
Yeah. Shout out to,
With
to Alex Van Aken, who I'm in the video version of the show. I'm wearing the kind of funny pink shirt that he had just designed right before he got accepted over at Game Informer. But yeah, shout out to him in his new opportunities.
Yeah, and of course, longtime shout out to Blessing Adeoye Jr., who made not just the dream happen, but the dream happen, and is working for Kind of Funny. So,
Yep.
and absolutely killing it over there. Uh, but I like, so Ian has now spun off. He's doing A plus anime, um, and he's doing that, making that his focus as well as his own YouTube and Twitch stuff. So, like, I was definitely tempted to be like, maybe we should postpone this one. I should get like an update and like talk to him about that. But that could be a future episode after things settle down for him.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think you
I
cover in the intro, like, hey, we recorded this before all that stuff went down, so you're gonna hear us talk about it in the present tense, and,
yeah
and that's just how it rolled. Yeah, I mean, like things change, and on that show in general, uh, Logan in particular had kind of already started branching out a little bit and reaching out to people. Like he did a special like one-off episode of that Nerdy Site show where we talked with a guest about the Premier League and kind of really diving into that. And he was sitting down to record another of those episodes this weekend. And I basically like with that conversational podcast launching, I was like, hey, do that under this banner because that's the more appropriate place for it.
yeah
So he's going to be like sitting down and recording one of those episodes basically today, I think. So we'll get that, and it's we don't have it set in locked in like a set schedule. It's not like a every week or every other week kind of thing. It is going to be a hey, this is a podcast for when we sit down and have these conversations or reach out to friends to have these conversations. In part, I think because we already have enough like regular things on the
hmm
plate. So adding in yet another, regular weekly show wasn't necessarily something that we have the bandwidth or even necessarily the interest in doing that much of at the moment. Let's test this out for a little bit as kind of an as needed or as appropriate. And then if it gains traction, we can always kind of ramp it up and try and turn it into a more weekly basis. But I would say this very much is like our version of the almost the we have cool friends model that Kind of Funny's doing now, where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, theoretically that was like an every week kind of show, but then obviously everything hit, and so now it's just kind of Greg talks about it as like the irregularly scheduled show, and I basically just stole that when when describing this one as well. So it's a show that we will have when we have it. We have a new podcast feed for it that I will get submitted to iTunes today now that the episode's live, and so it'll be on iTunes and Spotify in the near future. But keep an eye out for that. And yeah, it was. I mean, for what I listened to it, since I have very little interest in One Piece, it sounds like you guys got super in the weeds on some One Piece
Oh yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
As I would expect, no less coming from you and Ian there.
Yeah, we had a very it wasn't just getting into the weeds. We had a very high level conversation about it because we talked about we didn't talk about it like it was a manga, comic, or anime. We talked about it as it was literature.
Yeah,
We
no,
had a very we had a very high level conversation about it. I still stand with my opinion in what I said in that episode that One Piece is one of the greatest works of Eastern canon, and the fact that we're like witnessing it coming out regularly is a blessing that will, like, depending on how long humanity lasts, like this is definitely entering in the canon for like the Eastern canon for literature, in my opinion. Uh, which is crazy to think, but the story just really is that amazing. Um, that being said, like it's still a fun conversation. If you like One Piece, listen to it. If you don't like One Piece, listen to the beginning of it, and if that sounds good to you, stop. And like we give a very like our intro to that episode is very much a this is why One Piece is good. This is why you should read it. That's why you should go do it. Like, is it incredibly long? Is it coming up on 1,000 chapters? Yes. Is it still worth it? 100%. So being able to talk to somebody about that, because here's the thing, I had like left One Piece behind. I was like, One Piece is a like a comic and manga that is going at a pace that like I like to burn through it really quickly, so I usually wait till like an arc is over. But I had gotten like really backlogged on it and kind of just like ignored it for probably 2 3 years, and then Ian and Nato got me into it again
Mm-hmm.
because they're like it's so good. I'm like fine, I'll read up on it, and burnt through so much in such a short period of time, and it's like okay, yeah, it is still that great. It just really is just such a phenomenal series. Being able to talk to Ian about it on a like basic introductory level to then having like some really serious like highbrow, high level conversation about it, and then of course ending it on the question that everybody really wants to know. So, and I won't spoil that because it's such a good question. But that is kind of like the format of what the show is going to look like as far as when I'm hosting it. I really want to have these good introductory portions of the show, and then moving into whether it's deep in the weeds, whether it's a high level conversation, whatever the situation might be, because I really want to flesh out this high level conversation that I don't think gets answered because people want to keep things basic and simple for One Piece because they don't want to make it even overly complicated. But there's definitely going to be more stuff like that coming out from me. But like you mentioned, it's irregular because the reality of the situation is we don't know how this podcast is going to land.
Mm-hmm.
We literally started it off on a super niche subject that's not essentially the most friendly thing, but I think is going to do that. I think there is enough people who are interested at One Piece at this level that will definitely enjoy it. Um, that being said, I will say that this next episode is not going to be that way. Like it's going to be different depending on who hosts. And I like the idea that it reminds me a little bit of shows like Bon Appetit or other shows that really have like a full rounded out cast of hosts that can then come in and be slotted in on the subject matter that is important to them or that they want to talk about. And I think that that's really going to be the strength of this podcast. But in order to really understand how much effort and resources we put behind it, we do need people to tell us and give us feedback and share it with the people who they care about and who think that would care about this subject matter. Sharing that is going to be the number one way that we figure out uh, how much effort and resources we need to put behind this. Like, is this a show that needs to become a regular show every week? And if so, what is our schedule going to look like? Like, it comes down to, when I say resources, I mean both, mostly human resources between who's going to host, how's it going to work, like what's our schedule going to look like. Like, it's going to basically rearrange a lot of things if we end up making it a weekly show. That being said, if it's only popular enough to be a monthly show, it'll be an awesome monthly show. Um, there's a lot to it that I think going into it, we'll definitely be able to give you guys a more concrete answer of what it's going to look like in the future. But until then, give One Piece episode with Ian Purcell from A Plus Anime a listen. It's good stuff. I think it fills in kind of a gap that we've had for a while since Christian wasn't doing well and had to leave for the sake of his health. And I missed that anime podcast.
Yeah. I mean,
That anime podcast was a good podcast. Christian
yeah.
is such a good anime resource, and so I've been missing that for such a long time from our content, and so I'm like, well, let's go ahead and do that. So
Yeah, and that was another one. Obviously, it's something you and I haven't really spoken too much about. But as I was writing, kind of the year two kind of blog post, one of the ideas, one of the ideas, and one of like our stretch goals, kind of early on was um, uh, a comics show kind of thing that I would maybe do on like a monthly basis, because I would love, like back when I was doing like my daily vlogs on Trevor Trove, I was doing comics and anime as like a once a week kind of thing. um, and so looking at that anime pod, I started looking at it and thinking like, you know, obviously we'll never be like the expert, or that the experts that Christian was, and certainly I will never watch nearly the amount of anime that Christian consumed. But I know that you know have an affinity for anime, and it is still an area that I would love to get more involved in outside of just like My Hero Academia. So it's one of those things that like maybe down the line that can turn into a monthly, like you and I sit down and watch a couple things or something like that, and just kind of check in on them. So maybe that is another thing that we can kind of bring back in some form or other, that just retools that show a little bit, to try and utilize what resources we have and what kind of tools we have available to us. So, we'll, again, like a lot of stuff is up in the air, and we don't want, I don't ever, one of the things I was careful about in the year two kind of was like overcommitting, because I feel like we maybe probably overcommitted. Well, we definitely overcommitted a little bit in year one, and that's why Twitch streaming kind of just almost immediately fell by the wayside. Like I played a whole bunch of Outer Worlds at the beginning, and then just nothing. But that's another area I want to really dive back into, and so it's slowly adding things back into the mix, as opposed to coming out the gate and saying we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and here's what you can expect. If we can do it in an appropriate and manageable kind of dose, and in a lot of cases that might just be a once a month kind of thing, because that's maybe all we have time for, with everything else we're doing, as well as just kind of in our personal lives and in our work lives and all that stuff. But that's another thing that is constantly kind of floating in the back of my mind, is how can we incorporate some of those other ideas, just like you said, like with that conversational podcast, it's kind of a mix of a handful of other shows. Maybe that anime pod can turn into a mix of the anime ideas, or the comics, or even the wrestling show that you and I maybe had originally kind of looked at doing. Kind of do something like that as a monthly check-in on some of the more niche forms of pop culture out there that we have an interest in, but maybe not as an intimate knowledge of. So yeah, that's just another thing kind of percolating in the back of my mind out there, that kind of feels worth mentioning in that moment. Any other year one or year two touchstones you want to kind of touch on?
That is, no, not really. Like, I think we're good on that. Cover the past, cover kind of the present and the future. So I think we're kind of. Oh, I will say, um, my plans to start, like, right before my computer went to hell, and has continued to stay in hell despite all the new parts that I've bought for it over the last year. Um, like I've now gotten to the point where I have no idea what could possibly be wrong with it, so I'm going to have to pay somebody to come fix it, which is not something I enjoy, but it is what it is. And once that gets up and running and I can start getting back to it, I'm gonna start streaming again. Like we're gonna start, like you guys are gonna see a concerted effort from us to start streaming again. So look forward to that.
Cool.
I have not touched Undertale since I last streamed. So there you guys go.
Yeah, I have obviously I have a PS5 on pre-order, and some of the accessories and stuff have started showing up. I have my my PS5 controller here, and my PS5 Pulse 3D audio headset and that kind of stuff. And so yeah, one of the reasons I really sat down over this last couple weeks and finally pulled out the new like streaming PC that I'd bought back in like April or May or something like that, like, and it had literally just been sitting on like the ground next to the other setup that I'd been doing all the podcasts and stuff off of. I finally sat down, got that all plugged in, working, and I went in and got a 4K HD 60 Elgato, and have it installed in the PC, because I want to try and do streaming in the new gen, with the PS5 and the Series X, as they launch here in a week and a half's time from when we're sitting down and recording this. So I think that's a potential. It's a good entry point for us to really kind of dive back into that side of things, and hopefully have some fun with all that stuff. I've been joking, and teasing it out on Twitter, and especially as I pissed off a whole bunch of Demon Souls fans this week, with some tweets. I have Demon Souls pre-ordered, so there's a good chance we're gonna see maybe a sequel to my Bloodborne stream from a few years back. I'm not going to do 24 hours. That was insane. I will never do 24 hours of those kinds of games again. But it is the month typically associated with Extra Life. So and with the new gen stuff, I'll probably sit down and try and do like, okay, let's do an 8-hour stream of Demon Souls and see how far I can get, or see how this plays out, and do some of that stuff for charity. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I still don't imagine it'll win me over, but especially because games have continued to get into the dodge and parry mechanics just in general in recent years, that maybe I will have a better understanding, better appreciation for it. And I say that as I'm going through and replaying or playing New Game Plus on Ghost of Tsushima right now, so getting comfortable with that a little bit again. So yeah, we'll see what happens in terms of kind of next gen streaming, but I have been investing in it on my side of things, so hopefully that kind of keeps me accountable to actually sit down and say like, hey, well, I spent all this money on this, so I shouldn't just let it go to waste. I guess I should sit down and try and figure this stuff out, make it work. So yeah, that's kind of some of our. It's a little bit of our look back on year one of That Nerdy Site, as well as some of the look ahead here to year two. I think it's going to be, hopefully a good year. Obviously, this last, especially 9 months has been rough on a lot of people, us included. But hopefully we can start turning the corner on that at some point. And obviously, a lot of that's going to, rely on how things go this week with all the election stuff. But hopefully the times will start getting better for us all, and we can start kind of just turning things around. So another little thing I wanted to certainly bring to the table, that we originally was going to be like we would both sit down and talk about it, but you haven't had a chance to sit down with it, so I will kind of we won't go as in depth as we wanted to, or as I wanted to, but obviously season 2 of The Mandalorian started this week, and I sat down and watched that basically like the night it went live. You, Cameron, have not yet had a chance to watch the season 2 premiere, so I will avoid.
Nope, because my internet died.
Yeah, Yay! So I will avoid going too heavy into spoilers or anything, and obviously we have that D plus show. So and I've wanted to do like a Mandalorian season 1 episode of that D plus show for a while. So maybe we'll finally pull the trigger and sit down and do that in the next week or two. But yeah, Mandalorian is back. I really enjoyed this season 2 premiere. I think I was one of the people that like really enjoyed pretty much all of season 1. Like, yeah, there's an episode or two in there that takes a little bit of a dip, but I still appreciate even in those episodes. It's a kind of like adventure of the week kind of thing, and it's a very different paced storytelling for a Star Wars show, that really really works for me. The kind of like I didn't think I remember thinking as I was watching this season premiere, I didn't think I'd ever really be interested in like getting behind the Western as like a genre really. But hey, turns out if you just throw some Star Wars coat of paint on it, there's a lot of fun stuff in that. And it helps that so much of maybe Ghost of Tsushima even has like, even though it is obviously a samurai story, there's a lot of similarities there in terms of cinematography around samurai versus cinematography around the Western. In particular, like every time a duel comes up in Ghost, I immediately think of just like gunslingers and stuff like that. So yeah, seeing that pop up in The Mandalorian. I jokingly tweeted out the other day of like, hey, The Mandalorian is just Jon Favreau finally getting a second chance at cowboys and aliens and doing it right this time, because it has that like that Star Wars aesthetic to it now. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I don't want to dive into spoilers or anything, but you mentioned you had maybe some questions you wanted to throw at me on it, Cam. So I will throw it to you then.
Yes. Does Baby Yoda show up in episode 1?
Oh, of course, yeah. No,
Good. 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 Good.
Baby Yoda is not like Baby Yoda has a lot of cute Baby Yoda moments in episode 1.
That's what
I will say that. Yeah. But Baby, it does not immediately throw you into the overarching plot that we were maybe left off with. It like much like the rest of the Mandalorian, it kind of like introduces a little bit of seeds of where that story is going to take us, including a couple big kind of like reveal moments slash tie-ins to established characters and lore and stuff. But it's not like it doesn't suddenly change up the show and it's like, okay, suddenly we're going to be on this quest for Jedi. Like, yeah, we're kind of still on the quest to find the Jedi, but it's going to take us a little while to figure out how to find the Jedi, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I see. Very good. Very good. Let me think here. Other questions I had about it. Because episode 1 of The Mandalorian was like incredible because it ended with like that massive like blowout fight.
Yep.
Is there another big blowout fight at the end of this episode, or is it just kind of like that was episode 1 of The Mandalorian, season 1, this is season 2? Like, what kind of shift in tone is it? Because a lot of things did happen in season 1 of The Mandalorian to kind of change the attitude and affect the personalities of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how is Mando's approach to season 2? Like, is he coming off as a much more approachable person? Or is he still Mando?
Yeah, I would say he's more approachable. There's even a reference in there that he is more accepting of droids now, as a result of kind of the actions of season 1. In terms of kind of like the big action set pieces there, the show opens with a really cool fight sequence that I really enjoyed and got a kick out of, and then it has a big action sequence to wrap things up, which was very fun for me, especially as a fan of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, because it ties into things I specifically remember from that game, or from those games, that help just kind of flesh out and further establish the lore of this universe, and take elements from other forms of media, and kind of bring them into this. One of the one of the central characters of this episode, without getting into spoilers, is was introduced in the aftermath story that exists kind of as part of the reboot. It's not something I've read personally, but I think it's cool that that character, or a character that's mentioned and introduced in that, is now making their way onto to the big screen in I think cool and interesting ways. There's also some really fun bits of casting in here, some that I did not catch because they're understandably in some cases just hidden under a whole bunch of alien makeup, but then realizing who it is and then going back and like rewatching the episode after the fact, it's a fun little like, oh, that's a nugget, just like episode or season 1 had a lot of that kind of like fun stunt casting too, where it's like, oh, it's cool that like they brought that person in for such and such a role. This season especially kicks off with a couple of those roles that are I think really fun little twists on maybe what you might expect or something like that.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked.
Yeah, definitely recommend it. It's a great way to kick off the season. It is I want to say it is like on the longer side of episodes, but I also haven't really focused on like a rewatch of season 1. Like I had it on in the background, but I wasn't really paying attention to how long each episode is. I think the first episode of this season was like 55 minutes or something like that, which maybe feels long, but it also is that the Mandalorian takes its time establishing where you are, and you have so many of those just moments where it's Mando and the baby walking to a place and getting a feel for that environment, and you get a couple of those kinds of sequences in this. There's also just a ton of little fan servicey kinds of things, be it characters or aliens that are sprinkled through here, or even elements in terms of like ships or speeder bike kind of things that like pop up, and it's like, oh, that's kind of cool that they like whether like regardless of your feelings on the original sources or something like that, it's like, oh, it's cool that they found a way to tie that element in, or we're seeing a different version or variation of a thing. And again, I'm having to like dance around spoilery kinds of things because I don't want to ruin it for you. But yeah, like there were a lot of moments in the first episode. Like I pretty much just had a smile on my face the whole first episode. It was a good time start to finish. And yeah, I really enjoyed this first episode of The Mandalorian season 2. And I look forward to, like, there were moments in there where I started thinking about like some of the bigger casting news that we've gotten, a la like Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano, and thinking like, oh, like much like the first season, we've seen so little of season 2, like in terms of trailers or anything like that, or even like leaked images or something like that I was like, I have no idea what Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano is going to look like, but I'm super excited for it. And I'm super excited for, if this season is going to be used, like some of the stuff that has come out seems to be referencing the idea that season 2 is maybe going to be used to, almost backdoor launch other stories, miniseries or something like that in the universe, and so maybe we will get an Ahsoka spinoff or something like this, with the idea especially of like cast somebody like Rosario Dawson in that for necessarily like a one-off episode or something, especially on a character that integral to the expanded canon that they seem to be wanting to kind of flesh out and build more with. So it'll be interesting to see how some of that plays out, and I'm just excited to be along for the ride again here for the next 7 weeks now. I look forward to you actually sitting down and watching it, so we can like, we can text over, what'd you think of this or what'd you think of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that sometime tonight. I'm gonna have time for it, so.
Be a nice little birthday treat for you there.
Yep, it'll be a nice little birthday treat for me.
Yeah.
Although I'm having chicken cordon bleu for lunch/dinner today, so that's a treat enough on itself. I'm very excited.
Very nice.
Also, I should tell people there will be an update. So last year, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. Last year was kind of like a big announcement for a lot of things, not just that nerdy site, but myself as well. I came out publicly as being abrosexual. Um, I very cautiously didn't do it and put it on Facebook for like 6 months because it's Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually I was like, I need to kind of put this out there because when people are, especially, and this is something that we should speak to because November 3rd is coming up. By the time you listen to this, you might be getting ready for election day, and I just want to say, if you have been listening to our podcast for any sort of amount of time, you kind of know where a lot of us stand. But what I did about 6 months ago is I saw a lot of people posting and tweeting, and specifically on Facebook, posting a lot about how, um, you know, they are voting the way they're voting because of how it affects them. Which is it's fair. It's selfish, but it's fair. Um, but a lot of people were, you know, tweeting about or messaging about this on, sending out this idea and message that because certain of these issues about the people who are at risk under this current administration continuing into the next 4 years, what that could mean for them. I have to talk about, I came out publicly on Facebook and basically said, listen, if you know me and you care about me, you love me, these are things that impact me. Before Election Day, I just asked that everybody take time to, if you haven't voted already, I've already voted. I submitted my mail-in ballot already.
Yeah, same.
Arizona's one of those. Yeah, Arizona's one of those states that it's just like let you vote the way you want to, and not have to worry about. There's never really been any issues of voter fraud in Arizona, but especially with mail-in ballots. But I will say that it take time to don't just think about yourself. Think about the people in your life. Think about the people in your family, your friends, and the people that they care about as well. Because your vote matters. Your vote has consequences and very real things. People who voted for a third party in 2016 will tell you that for the most part, they're not doing that again. And I'm one of those people. I regret my vote in 2016 immensely. I don't regret my vote this year. I voted for the candidate who I believe is the best chance for us to return to a state of respect and dignity in the highest office of our country. And I cannot imagine really what the next 4 years will look like when there's no re-election to be worried about. So that being said, vote your conscience, vote the way that you feel like you need to vote, but please understand that voting is always something that's bigger than yourself, and it's bigger than the people in your influence. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about me. So
I would also, just real quick before we dive into you, I would also
yeah,
say voting is about more than just the presidency. Like voting
yes.
is
Oh, yes.
about all of the other things on the ballot. It's about all the other officials that you might be voting for, at state level, or even at your city or county level, and all the propositions you might have and whatnot. And yeah, it's try and like I again I've talked about it on the show before. I get that as a straight white middle class male, I'm one of the legitimately least persecuted, even though the people who love to like play the victim think we're the most persecuted kind of in our no, we're just fine, and we're going to be just fine regardless of how this election plays out. But like that is drastically unfair to the all of the people that don't look like me and don't check those boxes. And I always try and look at something greater than myself and recognize that, hey, I would much rather see all of those other people get more opportunities afforded to them, that my privilege has bestowed upon me. So if that means I lose a little bit of privilege or whatever, good. Like I've had it for far too easy for far too long, kind of thing. So yeah, I always try and that's how I vote my conscience is recognizing that like there are other communities that that need this support and need my vote much more than I do.
Yeah. Um, One thing I did want to mention as well is, especially when it comes to your local elections, become an educated voter. Do everything you can to educate yourself about voting. The only reason money has the power that it has in politics right now is because we do not have a large enough educated voter base.
Yeah.
Like being an educated voter gives you more power in an election than all of the money that people could be throwing at you, because you know where you stand on these topics, you know where you stand with these candidates, and if you know that, the amount of money that campaigns are willing to waste to throw at you to try to sway you is in like insane. I have been, as an independent voter in Arizona, which is now a swing state, um, as an independent voter who, like, because the reality of the situation is this: when I vote locally, I vote across the board. Party does not impact my decision as much as who the person is, what qualities they possess as far as leadership, and in the role that they're running for is. I really do look at it more like a job interview than as an election. If you're going to be my mayor, I want to know. Like, I voted for my Republican mayor in Mesa. Um, he has shown that he is dedicated towards revitalizing the city in some of its like most older, like in some of the oldest parts. He's brought back things and like found places in the budget for, Merry Main Street, which is a holiday themed, festivities for what is like, and it like in my early teenage years was canceled permanently because of budget issues. And finding a way to put it back on, bringing businesses in downtown Mesa into it, getting everybody involved, bringing back like the little miniature skate rink that they have that the Parks and Rec department runs. Like, it was amazing to see this brought back in such a great way. And he's a Republican, but I've seen him work across the, like, regardless of party, to ensure the best possibilities for Mesa, Arizona. And I know that he has people who work with him who are Democrats, and it's like that's the kind of local people I want in charge. People who just find the best ideas, work with the best people, and do that. And I know that I can trust my mayor to do that. That being said, that's that is a reality that could be possible in your local elections. So do so. Find the best people possible, because once again, I have been plagued by political advertising asking me to change the way that I voted or change the way that I think about candidates and policies and propositions. And because I'm an educated voter, they're wasting their money on me. I already know how I was going to vote, and I was sure of it because I educated myself about it. Educate yourself about it.
Yeah,
Their resources are out there.
one of my more activist friends down in Tucson posted I saw the other day. Look, I'm not one to say, quote, vote for Democrats because Democrats are always great, quote, end quote. But I will say, vote for Democrats because it's the best way to trick bigoted millionaires into lighting piles of their own cash on fire. This trick also works on millionaire Democrats when you vote for progressives over centrists. Pro tip. And then she had linked basically like all of the money GOP PACs are like pouring into elections here in the last couple of weeks of the campaign. And I was like, yep, that's. So you talking about, being an educated voter makes you more immune to the money side of things, certainly resonated with me and reminded me of that, of seeing that on Facebook.
Yep, I like Martha McSally. I don't know if there's a candidate's campaign that has done more to try to win my vote than Martha McSally. And that was never going to happen. In a million years, I would never vote for Martha McSally. You'd have I don't understand why people would even swap their vote over Mark Kelly. Well, I do know, because I've seen the propaganda that they've thrown out. The amount of money that the GOP has spent to try to secure Martha McSally's seat is insane. And knowing that on top of it, and just seeing how much money they waste, I block the number of people who send me these text messages, and then I get the same text from a different number.
Yeah.
They are wasting so much money on this to try to get her reelected. Or sorry, let me rephrase that. To get her elected. She has never
Yeah.
been elected.
Yeah.
she lost her election and then got appointed because Ducey sucks. Anyway, that being, let's move. But basically, vote to your conscience, but also be an educated voter, so that when you are voting your conscience, you know that you're making the right decisions.
Yeah. Specifically here in Arizona politics, it was fascinating. After 2016, so I used to work at the Arizona Community Foundation, which was in the very same building as John McCain's office, and then Jeff Flake's office was right across the street. And when and I worked there for I started working there in 2014, and there was like occasionally, people out there on the street, protesting or having signs or something like that, asking for people to honk or that kind of thing. But it was like very rare. It was I like maybe once every 4 or 5 months I would see somebody out there when I was like walking to and from lunch or something. After 2016, it was like a 3 times a week occurrence at minimum. Um, uh, People were just out there protesting against Trump, against Jeff Flake, and against McCain. And then so it became this like surreal level of activism that I'd never seen like in person to that degree, all the way up through when I left there last year. It was still, regularly people were out there congregating, especially when McSally kind of got put in and basically because she just moved into McCain's office. So yeah, like there was a, a huge uproar when that all went down, and people just continued to basically it dwindled a little bit, obviously when Flake left office. But yeah, it was just surreal seeing that many people out there on that much of a regular basis, and like that more than anything was giving me hope, I guess, after 2016 of like, wow, if it like maybe this is finally activating, a segment of the Democrat base that might have otherwise stayed home or something like that. And we're seeing obviously in record numbers of early voters, record numbers of young voters getting out there and voting. So I'm personally hopeful that we see a lot of change here in the next few weeks. But also like you see kind of like it's incredibly concerning because you see everything going to the courts like well after any of that really would have been able to be educated or be notified, well after any voters would be able to be notified that, hey, if your vote was already mailed in, it might not get counted because some court is saying that your vote has to be received by such and such a date. And like the levels of obstruction and suppression are infuriating. And I'm just hopeful that people get out there in mass to the point that like even those attempts fail, like we saw a little bit in 2018, and so I'm hopeful that like that'll just continue here in 2020. But we will see. It's going to be a stress-filled week, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then as an update to my personal news, coming out being aberasexual, trying to, break my like. It's weird because I got really good at pretending to be straight for a very long time. Um, and it's been an interesting year because, like, I'll just say it. I was scared about and worried about how accepting the LGBTQ plus community would be to me, considering that it's not like I just came out. Um, like there was a lot of fear that I still had when I came out about a lot of things. And to just kind of give a quick update here, everything's really gone amazingly. Um, Outside of a few road bumps here and there, I have to say that the love and acceptance that I've received from my friends and family has been phenomenal, but also uh, to the LGBTQ plus community as a whole, um, did the best thing they possibly could, which is they just didn't treat my coming out as anything different than anybody else's coming out, um, and just treating me like I was normal, which and accepting me because of that. Like there was nothing special about needing to accept me. It's just of course I was. Um, it's sad. I was hoping to march in my first Pride parade this year, but of course that was canceled by COVID.
Yeah.
Uh, COVID's really done a lot this year, but it's also brought a lot more things into sight. I'll be putting out a video later today. So this will be coming out on Sunday as kind of just like an update on things. But I wanted just to go ahead and say thank you so much to all the friends and family of that nerdy site for uh, you know being by my side for the last year. And as I've really come to terms with a lot of things and like worked out a lot of things that I just didn't know, thank you. And this has been a absolutely wild, wonderful, terrible, you know, year of our lives, but the best is yet to come. So,
Here's hoping. Here's hoping that is true, and we're not just on a downward spiral into shitstormville. But yeah, I'm hopeful. Despite my innate level of cynicism, or at least my surface level of cynicism, I have always been much more of an optimist than I tend to let on. And yeah, I'm glad that the year has been so great and accepting for you. I especially with the circles that we run in, I was never worried on that side of things. I obviously don't know more as closely like your maybe more conservative family side of things. But I'm glad that overall, even when you kind of made that second wave of kind of Facebook, that you were received with open arms, because you deserve it. You're a great dude, and you know status in the LGBTQ spectrum doesn't change that from happening, from existing. You are still a great dude, and I am very fortunate to know you. So, congrats on the anniversary of your coming out as well. Because yeah, that was another thing. Like, I remember we were obviously busy streaming when you posted your video last year. So like we saw it kind of come up, but we didn't really sit down and like check in on it until the end of the day, that first day of streaming last year, and we all just kind of sat on our phones and kind of pulled it up and and like watched your little video, and we're like, oh, good for Cam, cool. So yeah, that was another thing. Like as we sat down, or as we made plans to sit down and record today, I was like, oh, that's right, like the day of our anniversary is also Cam's birthday, is also the anniversary of him kind of coming out. So it's November 1st. Big day for all of us, but you especially, Cam. It was a big whirlwind day for you last year. So I hope you have many wonderful November 1sts to come. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you, Cam, for joining me. We can go around the metaphorical table with any plugs we have. You can follow Cam at RevCabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, shout out to A Plus Anime launching itself as a brand new show, and no, not a new show, but as a new effort and a new, as a spin-off from OK Beast. And Ian Purcell, shout out to Alex Van Aken for starting at Game Informer. You can actually see his first kind of appearances and work already. And also, massive shout out to all of you. If you're a listener to this, if you've joined us from day one, if you've been with us since before we launched That Nerdy Site, or you've been with us just recently in the last year, thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for being part of our audience, and know that we love and appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I, of course, echo all of that, and yeah, would specifically encourage you to go check out the first episode there of that conversational podcast with Cameron and Ian, checking out their thoughts on One Piece. In terms of other new stuff, there is you can go to our YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite, and you can check out the video I put up on Super Mario Brothers. It's about a half hour of me kind of playing through and like reflecting back on specific Super Mario Brothers, the OG game memories. I've already at this point recorded the next couple episodes on Ice Climber and on Excite Bike on the NES Classic. So we'll get those. I still need to figure out like what the schedule for this one is going to be. It might be like we currently have podcasts going live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So maybe this will be like a Tuesday, Thursday kind of thing to kind of fill in the gaps. So we have daily stuff going out there. We will see, but yeah, keep an eye out on all of our channels for all the new stuff. And yeah, you can if you really want, you can go follow us on twitch.tv/thatnerdysite, where hopefully we will be starting to get more into the streaming game again here very soon. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all of the latest content from us. And if you liked what you heard, please, as always, rate, review, like, subscribe, and maybe even consider supporting us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this very show. This month's early access episode is me and Logan talking about some of our favorite some of the best and worst TV series finales. We had a good chat about that spawned off on the How I Met Your Mother tangent we had on this show a few weeks back. And then also, now that it's available to everybody for the public, our epic 4.5-hour conversation around the best PS4 exclusives is out there as well that you can go check out. Me, Cameron, Frank, and special guest Brandon Gann, as well as special guest Aaron Jesus, kind of ranked and or not ranked, but went through that bracket of PS4 exclusives and had a great 4.5-hour conversation that you can kind of just enjoy maybe half an hour a day between now and the launch of the PS5 next week. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.